Hello and welcome to our webinar. Today you'll get an extended look into the definitive guide to migrating your infrastructure to the cloud. Whether you've already read the guide or not, this webinar will be a useful tool to help you understand how to position, prepare for, and execute a move to the cloud. The webinar is brought to you by Xtium, a leading provider of managed cloud hosting, online backup, and virtual disaster recovery services for small and medium-sized businesses. Let me go over today's agenda. Today we'll be discussing motivations and benefits for moving to the cloud, dispel myths and misconceptions, and guide you on getting buy-in from your executive team. We'll then go over the steps for a successful cloud migration and wrap up by answering any questions. Today's presenters are Jim Garrity, Josh Stedman, and Rudy Capone. Jim Garrity serves as Xtium's Interim Chief Executive Officer. Josh Stedman is Xtium's Manager of Support Services. Rudy Capone is Xtium's Solution Architect. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jim.
So today we're going to explore the motivations for why people move to the cloud. And then secondly, when you make the investment to go to the cloud, what are the true features and benefits that you can come to expect? The office move is really interesting. I mean, as a CEO, I can tell you that I am really risk adverse when it comes to watching critical systems go offline for any significant period of time, because it means that I'm not generating revenue. When I don't generate revenue, I'm not adding business value, and that's a bad thing for me. And so, as I would look at an office move, the first thing I would look at is how do I really minimize, if not eliminate, that window which I'll be down. And so, if you're a physical asset in the, and you want to figure out how do you make the jump to the cloud, you want to look at cloud companies that are going to help you with that migration, that are going to help you go from the physical world and migrate into the virtual world. And if you're already virtualized, it becomes really easy to kind of move that asset, keep your data in sync, and then just schedule a cutover to the cloud with little to no impact to your business. Now, those end-of-life servers become interesting because, at this point, you're trying to figure out, what are you going to invest in? And if your technology is not core to your business, when I say technology, specifically I'm talking about servers and networks. If that's not critical to what you do, but it is critical to your business, then outsource that stuff. Give it to the experts that really, they have the 24/7/365 operational engineering and architecture staffs that can really manage the full life cycle of the hardware and the assets that sit on top of that hardware. So I just get out of that business as quickly as you can. And the mission-critical applications, for me, are really important. You want to make sure you've got redundancy in the cloud, maybe across one provider with different locations or multiple providers with different locations, just to give yourself, the fault tolerance that you may need in the event that one provider has an issue. I think the second thing is that making sure that, all the database systems and the storage systems are all fully redundant. And you want the ability to, let's say today I'm invested in, I don't know, we'll call it a terabyte of data within that highly available application. And let's say I'm not sure if it's going to go to 2 terabytes or 10 terabytes or 100 terabytes. Let's say I just don't know. Going with a provider that can easily scale up in those large increments is something I would consider. Then the benefits of the cloud are, the business agility, the integration and the collaboration pieces, being able to very quickly and very simply, pull different applications, together, pull different communication streams together, scale them at the right levels, be able to patch manage them at the right levels. There's a lot of agility pieces, and that really flows then into the second piece, which is the flexibility piece. You want to effectively allocate your spend consistent with your growth, right? And they shouldn't be orthogonal. They should grow in the same fashion. So the flexibility to do that's really important. The next thing is big data. So I'll give you an example. The medical community. So it's one thing to say, okay, I go in for a CT scan, I go in for an MRI, I broke my arm, I was out walking down the street and I tripped over myself and break my arm, right? So, it's one thing to look at my arm break, but it'd be another thing to look at my arm break that was, let's say, desensitized, so you don't have any of the information about me or about my health or anything like that, and look at it across 200,000 other people that also had an arm break, right? So from a big data perspective, what's consistent about the arm breaks? And how then can I provide health care to people that have that very specific break? That's really useful information. And so cloud companies like ourselves are getting heavily into this big data type of a model where you can not just aggregate one customer's piece of data, obviously desensitized, but you can start aggregating a whole cluster of verticalized data, and then be able to make decisions on it that then have value that then you can present back to all those companies within the vertical. There's real compelling benefits to that big data piece. And the last thing is speed, and for those of you on the call that know me, you understand that I'm an incredibly impatient person, incredibly impatient. So I want to be up in minutes, not hours or days, and so the cloud gives me that capability. And so again, a great motivation for making a move. As we look at the next slide here, dispelling the myths and misconceptions about the cloud, there are a couple. The first is the cloud raises major concerns in security and privacy. On-premise solutions are safer. I would say that myth is only true if you're as big as cloud providers like ourselves. The reality is that they just don't have a big presence from a security perspective. They don't have a big presence from an infrastructure perspective, a network perspective. The second is, partnering with a cloud provider means I lose control over my sensitive data. Absolutely not. Think about the cloud providers really, if they're providing you the right service, they're an extension of you. And so that security model should remain in place whether it sits on site in your location or it sits with a cloud provider. So you should have access to all the data the way you normally would. We'll follow your organizational principles around who should have access to, different types of data based on your authorization, based on your role within the company. But no, your sensitive data, you'll have access to either way. Myth number 3, in order to move to the cloud, I have to rip and replace my existing hardware investments. Well, the answer is you will have to rip, right? So if you're moving from physical assets locally in your organization to the cloud, well then you can rip all those assets out locally. The value to you is that you're not spending on power and you're not spending on support staff and things like that locally. And you're not going to have to replace it. So the capital expense that you put into buying new servers and network and storage and all that stuff, you also don't have to worry about. Now you're in the cloud, you're trading that capital expense for going to an operating model. And when you do that, you have to understand that you'll have a monthly ongoing cost. But that monthly ongoing cost is right-sized to, the activity and the usability you're seeing across your application. And the fourth is, I'll be paying more for cloud versus maintaining my on-premise solution. So if I were to tell you, look, I'm moving one system to the cloud, right? And is it more expensive to buy the server versus using the cloud asset? I'd probably tell you it's a negligible difference in cost. If you have a lot of assets and you're looking to move to the cloud, you will certainly see a cost benefit. The bigger benefit in the cloud is going to be not just the cost, but what are the feature differences that I'm going to get? In the cloud, your fee, in most cases with the right provider is going to be baked in with, what is my cloud, infrastructure cost? What is that VM cost, along with the storage and everything else? But incorporating that cost is backups. Incorporating that cost is DR. Incorporating that cost is bandwidth. And so now I've got all these other features above just the cloud asset that become incredibly valuable to my business. And so, do I think myth number 4 is true or false? This is totally a myth. Again, at worst case, you're going to be the same costs. At best case, you're going to save a lot of money, and you're going to get a bunch of additional stuff you would never get if you were doing it yourself. So how do you sell your executive team? If you're talking about cost, you have to figure out a way where it's as cheap as what you're doing internally or even cheaper. But it's not going to get everybody excited until you show them it's cheaper and I'm getting all this additional stuff. The lower cost piece, that has to apply to the CEO and the CFO. Now, if you go down to IT folks, the IT director and managers, and you say, hey, guess what, we're going to save you a bunch of costs, they're going to tell you to get out, right? They're going to throw you out of their office. They're never going to allow you back because their issues are not the same. They're tired of saving money, right? They're tired of spending money too, but they're tired of saving money. And because every time you save money, it means they spend longer amounts of time at the office, that more work gets put on their plate, that their risk, goes dramatically higher than what it is if you weren't trying to always save money as a proprietor, right? So that's something to keep in mind. So what you have to do is to show them how their productivity increases. Hey, by going to the cloud, you're never going to have to get up at night again, right? You know, if you're in the cloud, the expectation is if something goes wrong in the middle of the night from a cloud infrastructure perspective, your cloud provider is going to fix the issue. So that should hopefully help you from a, from a quality of life perspective. Now, on the productivity side, there's nothing better in life as an IT person than getting back the time in your day. So now, instead of being a cost center supporting the business, you're a revenue generating center helping the business grow. Any technologist is going to want that job, right? It's fun. It's fun to create. It's fun to build. It's really hard to just always support. Let the organizations that are solely focused on supporting infrastructure support the infrastructure. You get back to generating value for your company. So then you want to find the competitive edge. So how do you deliver products faster? How do you deliver them with better quality? How do you reduce the cost? And how in that process do you improve your customer interactions? And so all of that becomes important. And then most importantly is, if I do all of those things, then how do I really just reduce my dependency on infrastructure so I can get back to making money? I can get back to increasing customer value, increasing shareholder value. And how do you do that? I mean, one of the things is just a great mobility strategy. For us, it would be great to be able to say, you know what? It's snowing outside, on the East Coast. Work out of your home. Work out of somebody else's home. Work from the beach. I don't care. As long as you're able to get the work done. You can connect from anywhere. You can do it securely. We can give you any desktop you want. Go buy whatever device you want. You want to buy a new smartphone today? You want to connect to the cloud? We'll ask you a bunch of credentials. You'll have multi-factor authentication. You'll get in. Now you'll see your desktop. Now you can connect to all your cloud assets. So now you become less dependent on an office. In the event of a disaster, you become less dependent. In the event of, just a simple snowstorm, this mobility strategy is going to change the complete way in which we do business. So again, another valuable way in which to, to think about, going and making that jump to the cloud. So now what I will do is I'll turn it over to Josh Stedman. Josh Stedman's going to get us started with a discussion around cloud migration. Josh, thank you very much.
Thanks, Jim. So earlier this year, Xtium conducted a survey of IT professionals across the United States, and we asked them what features they look for when choosing a managed service provider. Now, just like your taste in a car or when you're shopping for a house, everybody gave a slightly different answer. Everybody has different priorities. But what we came back was 5 main themes that pretty much everybody said something at least on this list or some variation of it. Those 5 items were backup, disaster recovery, failover, redundancy, or otherwise known as HABCDR, reliability or the SLAs provided by by the provider, the security capabilities, the price, and providing 24/7 support. Now, if we look at this list, what we see is the first 4 on here are all directly answered by migrating to a cloud provider. So any cloud provider is going to provide backup and disaster recovery solutions. Jim already touched a lot on that, went into that very much in detail. We're going to have added reliability and SLAs. So in the cloud, you're not going to be having a server that's sitting on one machine that's reliant on one set of hardware to be able to keep it up and providing content for you and your customers and your users. You're going to have an array of servers. You're going to have a cluster of 30 machines that are all providing solutions to your one VM. The security capabilities, again, Jim went into that in detail. There's a lot of good options in the cloud. And let's talk about price. Now, Jim, again, talked about going large with your private cloud if you're going to go that way. But let's talk about going the other way, going small. If you have a machine that's not going to carry very much traffic, let's say a domain controller for a small domain, maybe 30 users. The lowest end machine that you're going to be able to build out for that is probably going to be in the range of 2.4 gigahertz processor, probably a quad core. You're going to have to put a couple gigs of RAM into that. You're going to have to get a 400 gig hard drive. Now, a lot of that resources, a lot of that heavy lifting there is going to be wasted. It's not going to be needed for that. You don't need that much processing power. You don't need that much memory, and you don't need that much storage for something that's just going to be serving AD. In the cloud, you can get a single vCPU. You can get 1 gig of RAM, and you can get 40 gigs of hard drive, just enough to run the operating system in there. Your options with the physical hardware are either to waste all that extra space, or you're going to cram other operations into that, and that's going to add more fragility into your solution. Can you run a file server on your domain controller? Sure. Is it a great idea? Best practice, no. So the 24/7 support, okay, that's not directly addressed by the cloud, but any decent cloud provider is going to have a good, solid support system. And it is something that you do want to look in when you're choosing your cloud provider. So in the process of migrating your environment to the cloud, Xtium's come up with this simple roadmap. Now this is going to be not a step-by-step process that everybody will be able to follow through. There's going to be improvements and customizations that you'll need to do for your specific process, but this roadmap should get you on the way. We've got 8 simple steps, and if you follow this, you should be able to get a good idea of what it's going to take to migrate your environment to the cloud. The first thing that we have here, step 1, is you're going to determine your environment scope. What portion of your environment is going to be involved in this migration? Now, there are many factors you can consider here. You can, if you have a very small environment, it may not make sense to do anything other than a full migration. But if you have a large-scale environment, there's many reasons why you might want to do just a small part of that environment. Some of the pros of a full migration: you're going to get an upgrade of all your system at once. You're not going to have to worry about any over-the-wire latency if you're connecting back to your local office from the cloud, or from the local office to the cloud to be able to do any data transfers. And you're only going to have to do this once. The cons, of course, is that a large full migration is going to be much more entailed. It's going to be a longer process. You're going to spend a lot more time on the front end planning. There's going to be more upfront work getting everything together, and of course the heavy lifting of doing the migration. If you're trying to do the entire cutover in one night, it's going to be a long night. Sometimes it may also be difficult to convince stakeholders that it's the best move to make. Now let's face it, people don't like change. A lot of people have been doing this for a long time. They've been doing it on physical machines, and they don't see the benefits of the cloud yet. Sometimes doing a partial migration is enough to do to convince that. Now, maybe you want to start with just a new project or it's a department. If you can start new, then you can show the benefits of the cloud in just one area. You may also want to start with just disaster recovery services. Now, we do have a lot of customers who start with Xtium as a disaster recovery solution, and then as part of their first DR test, they get people their first real exposure to the cloud, and people think that's pretty nice. And then all of a sudden, it's a lot easier to talk people into migrating your production data over there. Once you've completed your environment scope, you should have a list of all your servers involved in migration. Make sure you go over this list, be Santa Claus, check it twice. Make sure that you're considering everything that main server is going to be relying on to be able to perform properly. If you're bringing over web servers, does that web application have a database backend? You're not going to want to connect over the wire with that. You want everything to move over together. Do you need to move a domain controller over as well to be able to provide authentication? When you have the full list of the servers in the scope, you'll be able to compile a list of all the resources that they're using and which applications and services are needed in the new environment, and that's going to help you on your next step. Step 2 is to verify compatibility. Now, all of your main applications are going to be supported in the cloud. You've got, of course, your Microsoft operating systems and your Linux operating systems as well. Microsoft Office, SQL Server, Exchange Server, the main business applications are all already cloud ready. Some industry-specific applications or any proprietary software, particularly anything that you developed in-house, you're going to want to look at it and make sure that it's going to be compatible. Some large software packages may require actually working with your software vendor to be able to provide that migrations, and in some cases, they may require you to contract for professional services agreement with them to be able to do a proper migration. This time, you may want to also consider the opportunity to upgrade your applications. This is a very good opportunity. You're going to be changing everything over if you're thinking about doing an upgrade in the near future, do it all at once. You'll save time that way. Once you have all your compatibility, you have a full scope of your environment, you can work with your cloud provider and get a quote of what it's going to cost you on a monthly basis to be able to do this. Make sure this fits into your budget. Shop around, talk to a couple different providers, and find out what is the market value of that environment is going to be. Now, consider while you're doing that, your basic needs, going back to the first slide that we had there. Consider the services that you'll be provided by the individual service providers. Some service providers may have a better support structure, some may have better monitoring, and find out what's important for you and your company to find the right fit for you. At this point, you've got your cloud providers at least narrowed down to maybe a small subset. You're going to be starting looking at the migration process. Now, that may weigh into your selection between the providers provide for you as part of the migration one assistance. What partnerships do they have with third parties that might want to do the migration? Now, have you ever moved before? Have you moved your house, you moved your apartment? Did you like getting all your friends to come and do the heavy lifting for your boxes? The last time you did a move, did you finish that swearing that the next time you move you're going to hire a company to do this for you? Think about that when you're planning out your migration. You might want to work with a third party. There are companies out there that specialize in migrating you to your cloud, and your cloud provider may have a relationship with one already who's used to working with your environment. By the end of step 4, at this point, you should have committed down to the vendors that you're going to be using, who you're going to be using for your cloud provider, who's going to be your migration team, whether it's going to be the provider itself, a third party, or your in-house team. So step 5, this is the easy part for you. Building out the cloud environment will be completely handled by your cloud provider. You can sit back and relax and just verify that everything's working. This is actually a great time to plan your vacation because the next few weeks are probably going to be busy.
So it's also important to know that during these 2 steps, oftentimes customers tend to change plans in the process of going through the migration. So what ends up happening is that they may want to add additional resources to the current environment, maybe even add even additional servers to that. So what's good to keep in mind is that the service provider that you select needs to be flexible in order to provide the services to you. Not only that, but also be able to move along with the rapid pace of the environment that you have. You want somebody to accommodate the environment which you exist and live and work in on a daily basis. So we find that to be a benefit when our customers are always on the move and rolling and want to scope the environment a tad different, maybe even a lot different than what they originally thought. So you want to have that flexibility and added agility from the service provider that you select.
All right, at the end of the build-out, you'll be ready to start your data migration. Now, again, this may be something you're doing internally. This may be something that your cloud provider is able to do for you, or you may have been contracted a third party to do this. Your migration team is going to handle your initial configuration. Your cloud provider most likely will provide a base config of your purchased software, but of course that's going to need to be configured for your environment, your use, and also any third-party applications that's not provided by the cloud provider will have to be installed and configured.
So when performing the initial data migration, this is, in my opinion, probably in a lot of other people's opinion, where the heaviest lifting comes into play. Your business isn't a business without its data. So making sure that the appropriate tools, the appropriate processes are set in motion to move your data accordingly in a safe and secure manner is paramount to your company's existence. Because if that data cannot move or something happens to that data during that move, you could be in severe trouble.
So once your data migration is completed, this starts the big and arguably the most important step. You want to test everything. Don't underestimate this step. Don't under-schedule or under-budget for this. You want to take your time and get as many stakeholders involved as possible. If you are an independent IT team working in a larger business, make sure that you're getting the sales team or the engineering team, whoever's going to be using this environment, get as many of them working with the system as possible. If you have end users who are customers outside of your company that are going to be using the environment, make sure that you put together a beta team. Get them to test this. You want to fix issues now before you go into production and get your environment as a whole beat on by a very large set of users. This is also a really good time to impress those stakeholders that were perhaps not completely convinced before that this is going to be the best bet. You should have everything a bit refined. You should be able to give performance validation on the environment and really show them how fast your new hot rod really is. You'll work with your cloud provider and your migration partner to correct any issues at this step. Finally, step 8. This is a big day, the cutover. Don't be surprised if you have some wedding day jitters when you start this. It's perfectly normal. Everything will work out okay. Your provider, you should work with your provider to schedule your cutover. In most cases, you're going to want to do this at a low impact time. You should have a general idea how long this will actually take you, depending on the size of your data set that you need to do a final copy with. You may be able to do this overnight. Maybe you want to do it on a weekend. Maybe, and as much as we all hate doing it, maybe we want to schedule this over a holiday. Whatever is going to be the least impactful for your business at large. Before you perform the cutover, make sure you inform all of your users that the environment will be moving and then it will be unavailable for a maintenance window. Plan out your cutover. When are you going to do it? How are you going to halt the production servers? Are you going to put them into a maintenance mode? Are you going to just put up a placeholder page saying, pardon our mess while we move, anything like that? But you do want to make sure that anything that will make changes to dynamic data, such as a database, are not accessible by users during the time of the migration. You need to make a change freeze at a point of time right before you start your final data migration. Migrate your data, and then once again, you're going to do a final round of testing to make sure that everything's working properly. Once your testing is complete, do a final cutover, bring the setup live, make changes to your DNS, and you're live. Congratulations. After the cutover, you need to decide what to do with the legacy environment, the platform you just migrated off of. Now, we would recommend that for some time you leave that legacy environment warm. Leave it online and leave that same maintenance page up online. Now, you need to allow time for DNS propagation. There may be some people who are getting to the old site even after your DNS changes are made. So you want to make sure that they don't just think that your site is down. You also want to make sure that you have time to catch anything that may not have been fully cut over. Maybe the DNS didn't get changed for a certain site or whatnot. Give it a few days, a week, see what works best for your needs. After that point, you want to set the legacy environment cold, but keep it there just in case anything happens. Shut everything down and make sure it doesn't cause any problems. Give that at least another couple days as well, and then you can start reclaiming that hardware and use it for other products if needed.
Thanks, everyone. We're now going to move on to some Q&A. We did get some questions throughout the webinar, so I will read them now, and any of you can jump in and answer. The first, what kind of network performance can I expect in the cloud? Will it be better than my on-site solution?
So for network performance, we tend to see that it actually increases when it's in the cloud, primarily because of the infrastructure that's required and actually running within a service provider. So depending on what you have within your environment, you may not have all the up-to-date networking equipment. Maybe you have too much traffic or too many protocols running within your environment. When in the cloud, when fine-tuned and honed, you could eliminate the majority of the chatty protocols, furthermore increasing the the throughput of your traffic, and also you actually utilizing that the bandwidth which is made available to those servers. On the external portion of that, if there's any need for additional bandwidth, that also can be allocated. Additional bandwidth can be allocated if need be, and also software measures could be taken to actually accelerate that WAN connectivity from point A to point B if need be.
That's a good point, Rudy. I'd also add in there the economics of scale. You did touch on it a little bit, but consider the fact that your cloud provider is going to be using much larger, heavier, beefier network equipment in there, perhaps a fiber backend. Xtium uses a 10 gigabit network on all of our equipment, on all of our backends. That tends to be a little bit pricey for you to be able to do with your 5-server environment, your 10-server environment, even a 100-server environment. It's really the equipment that becomes enterprise level and available at the MSP level.
The second question is, how important is it that cloud providers offer backup and disaster recovery solutions?
So I would say that it's paramount. I would say that I wouldn't sign up with a cloud provider that didn't have a minimum of backup solution, not only for themselves but for customers. So you want to make sure your cloud provider has their own get-out-of-jail-free card for all of your data, all your systems, and then as a customer, you should have additional backups beyond that. From a disaster recovery solution perspective, a lot of the cloud technologies have evolved today, and so I would find it a little bit risky to go with a provider that didn't have a DR solution, only because it's inherently built into the back-end fabric of most of the cloud technologies that are offered. And so I guess to summarize what I'm saying is, yes, every cloud provider should have backup and DR. If they don't have it, that would be a situation where you probably wouldn't invest in.
It would definitely be a big red flag if a provider didn't offer that sort of service.
The next question is, when choosing a managed cloud provider, what kind of service level agreement is offered?
So I'll start with this. I think that the service level agreement, I think, is something that really should be looked at. I see some cloud providers today that say, hey, we'll offer 100% uptime for your networking, your system. I actually see that quite a bit. And what you're seeing, when you start to dig in under the covers of what the offering truly is, what it is an offering is that they put a set amount of money aside for the expectation that some systems aren't going to work properly. So it's really a credit system more than it is a system of true service level availability. So the way I would build a service level agreement would say it's all dependent on the architecture of your service. So if I have one VM sitting somewhere in the cloud, the reality is, even though I've got 6 nines in my cloud infrastructure and my storage and 8 nines in my network, the reality is that one single VM, if it has operating system corruption or there's memory corruption or something simple, you're gonna see an outage. And what then is going to happen? Okay, yeah, you're right. There may be a provider out there that provides you a credit for that downtime, but the reality is, for me as a business, I don't want to play in the business of credits. I want my systems to always be up. So how do I achieve something more than 3 nines? Well, I need more things, right? If I have an application that runs on one system, running it on multiple systems and having it load balanced, maybe splitting out the application and the web layer from the database layer and making those database layers highly available, whether they're clustered, there's log shipping, there's those types of things. I would incorporate all those technologies into the picture. But that, again, starts to build that story of 4 nines, 5 nines, 6 nines. As a consumer, it's a credit game, right? If you want to go with a company that's going to provide you credits when things go wrong, that's fine. If you want it to get credits when things go wrong, but have the assurance that things won't go wrong by building the right architecture, that's when you make the bet towards a company that really looks at service level agreements against the architecture. That would be my recommendation.
So thank you, Jim, Rudy, and Josh. If anyone watching has any further questions, please contact us. We have our number here, or you can email solutions@xtium.com.